Hello, this is Daedalus with Nerds and Stuff, and today I'll be taking this Games Workshop Space Marine from this to this. Let's get started. So I've started out by priming the Space Marine with just black spray-on primer, and now we're going to do a little bit of airbrushing. I'm actually airbrushing on some Shield Brown right now. And this is actually going to be a build-up layer to an undercoat for the outer layer. So whenever I paint gold, which will be the underlayer, I always like to put a brown underneath. I find that this makes the gold just look a lot more rich. So whenever I paint it, I always put some brown down first. So now I'm just spraying that gold on, just making sure I can get it all over. So for this particular technique I'm going to be painting, it's called sometimes Hot Rod Red or Candy Red or, like Iron Man Red. And it's kind of a series of layers. First you build your metallic layer up, and then you apply this like clear coat. It can be different colors. For this video we're going to do some clear red. And so I need a really solid gold base below that. Now if you were making a ward for a game, maybe you just stop right there, because now you've got a shiny Space Marine. So now I'm airbrushing on the Tamiya Clear Red, and this is a unique paint. It's an alcohol-based paint, and it's semi-toxic, so if airbrushing, be sure you're wearing a respirator or ventilator, and spraying in a well-ventilated area, because this kind of stuff is not fun to inhale. So we're just going through and making sure I've got an even coat of this, and this is building up the true red that we're after. It's bright, it's shiny, it looks like it belongs on a sports car. It's not the usual armor paint for a Space Marine. It's heresy, if you will, but, I've painted a lot of other types of Space Marines. I got these for super cheap, so I just use them as like a fun little model to paint once in a while. I've done camouflage with other ones in the past, and now that we're done spraying this coat on, this clear coat, I'm just going to give it a wash with Carrobug Crimson. I just want to be able to give it some shadows. So I'm just going through and just kind of laying it on. This is thinned 1-to-1. It wasn't straight, because sometimes these Games Workshop shades are really thick. So this is just thinned down and just hitting everything, kind of taking off a little bit of that shine, because it dried really glossy. And just applying some shadows. Like if you notice on the shoulder pads, it's lined the inside of the shoulder pads, and I want to make sure it gets on the feathers of the eagle on the chest and all these little places, so that they don't all just have this artificial light kind of illuminating them. Now I'm coming through with a detail brush and kind of applying a little extra wash in some areas. This is coming straight out of the bottle. These are areas that I want to have darker shadows or more pronounced. So like I got inside his shoulder, kind of up against his torso, backs and the knees, kind of along the joints, so that they are very well pronounced. Areas that maybe with a thinned wash wouldn't be quite as visible, like right there where the leg armor kind of overlaps the heel. I want to make sure that's pretty dark too. And just kind of redoing some of these lined areas. Just making sure I've got a good solid set of shading. Now we're just going to be putting down some glorious gold for armor trim and highlights. Now this is the same gold that we used earlier to kind of make the foundation coat for the clear paint. And I'm just going to be going back through and kind of putting this down to give it that kind of fun highlights, the true Iron Man look, if you will. He's got the red armor with the gold trim, or I guess it could technically be red armor or gold armor with red trim, but any way you want to slice it, we need to get something else besides red on this model. Now I will advise you, I used the Tamiya Clear Red, and putting the paint on over that coat was difficult. I'm not sure if it's because of the finish as a result of the gloss coat that it mixed with, but when it dried, paint did not like to stick to it. So just keep that in mind. There's not really a way to do this without painting on top of that, so it is what it is. And it provides such a cool look, I'm willing to suffer a little bit and put on a few extra coats to make sure I've got good coverage, for the sake of this kind of metallic paint. I'm sorry that I'm not using my vise for this video, but I didn't really want to airbrush on my vise, so I just pulled out an old cork and pinned the model, and that way I could spray on the cork instead of my nice painting vise. So if you do get a little bit of vertigo going on or spinning too fast, I'm sorry. I really am. I feel for you. So I just keep going back through and applying more coats of this gold, because I'm building up the color. It's not going on very well, and I just want to make sure the whole trim is covered. Right there I'm getting kind of the inside edge of the trim. I just did kind of the outer edge first. Just want to build a good gold color up. Space Marines are kind of fun models. They're ones that I never got to really buy before. You know, when I was a kid playing Magic years ago, I'd go into the game shop and I'd always see these Warhammer 40k models sitting on the shelves. And there were a lot of them, and I just thought they always looked so cool. I mean, they're like Space Marines, right? How cool is that? Well, naturally, I could never afford to get into the hobby as a 14-year-old, but, I mean, I couldn't even afford to get into Magic as a 14-year-old. So they were just kind of always there, and every time I'd get into a new game and end up spending more time at the game shop, I'd go and look at them, but, man, it had such a high barrier for entry that I just couldn't justify it. If the models didn't come painted or even assembled, that was just way too big of a leap for me to take at that age. Now, I'm kind of considering stepping in. There's not a huge crowd that plays around me, but the models are just so cool. And they are something that I've been watching for a very long time, so maybe I'll indulge myself and pick up some Space Marines to play with. I've got kind of this little sprue of Space Marines that I have now, so when you do see other videos I might do that have some 40k content, that's kind of where they're coming from. But it's a game that just looks so cool. I know that the company is all evil and stuff, but I can look past the company, especially for just painting purposes. You know, I'm not buying Codex books every year if I'm just going to paint, right? Well, anyway, I've been painting some gold trim places on other parts of the model, getting the kneecaps now, making sure I've got solid coats on all of them, as well as his codpiece and kind of a, we'll say butt armor, right below his jetpack. Actually, we'll call that a heat foil. How's that? So that the power pack for his armor isn't too hot. Yeah, that sounds good. So now we're just going to move on to the pack itself. And just picked kind of a random layer. I wanted some color, it didn't really matter to me where, but I picked a good one, because this layer actually goes all the way down, so I can get a nice gold plate all the way down that helps break up the monotony across the back of just straight red. Don't get me wrong, red's a great color and all, but a little bit goes a long ways. Maybe it's just my preference. I tend to like the more blues and greens and browns, but reds are just so powerful. Like, I could never really have a Blood Angel army, because I couldn't do that much red. Not only is it a pain to paint, but, you know, it's, I don't know, not really my color. We've all got our colors. And if you like red, by all means, you go ahead and like red. If you have Blood Angels or Chaos Space Marines and you love them to death, good for you. I'm glad you enjoy it. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you what you can or can't paint, you know. Paint what you enjoy, because if you like what you're actually doing, if you like the models, if you like the colors, then you'll keep painting. And you won't have an army that's just kind of a gray or silver tide on the game table. And you know what, I've got one of those myself. Most of my army I haven't painted for War Machine, just I haven't gotten around to it. I'm slowly working on it, but when I do get the chance to play, it is kind of with a silver tide. So right now, I'm mostly going through this and trying to see how much gold is too much. Because I don't want to have all the details suddenly be gold, and then just have it be overwhelming gold with just a little bit of fun red. Because I painted this model to showcase the technique required to come up with this red, so I don't want to cover it all up, you know? So I'm just picking out some stuff on his helmet, grabbing a few fun things, like his kind of cranium collar, you might call it. wraps around the top of his head and down the sides too. Just getting some of that. So I am finding that I kind of need like 3 coats for good coverage, especially on these wider flat panel areas, like the kneecaps and kind of the plate of his power pack, and kind of this... the best way I could describe this little piece coming off the top of his head is like a Spartan hair that's been clipped. Like a horsehair helm kind of thing. Anyway, I just need about 3 coats of gold to be able to cover on this gloss coat that's sealed as a part of the clear paint. Now, it could be the Tamiya stuff in general. I don't use a lot of Tamiya, so I don't know from experience. In fact, I only have 3 Tamiya colors at all. I have the clear red, I have a clear blue, and a clear green, both of which will be used in future tutorials to make kind of the hot rod or candy versions of that for other Space Marines. So look forward to those in the future. So as I mentioned before, I am considering starting to get into Warhammer 40k. I've got the income now, and I've had the desire for years. I kind of like Space Marines. I'm thinking about maybe going Salamanders, so that I can get cool dragon scales going, and fire, and all that fun. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Let me know below. And if you have any advice for someone starting out, please tell me, because I'm coming into this with about a half dozen Space Marines that I probably can't run because I've done things to them that wouldn't make them tournament legal. And maybe I'm just full of crap and don't even know it, because I think, as far as what I've done to them, it's mostly just odd paint jobs, like this one. Although, if you did have some white scars, I think, have a lot of speed bikes or road bikes or whatever. I think if you did the white scar bikes like this, that would look pretty cool. We just kind of this hot rod tone. Or if you did some orc stuff. I've been seeing a lot of fun orc stuff. But some orc bikes done with the hot rod colors, that'd be fun. So now I'm just coming back through with the clear red and doing some touch-ups where the gold went a little crazy. I realized that I did these little details on his face, and they're just overwhelming. There's too much gold up there. So I'm actually going to be covering those up, just so that it looks a little less busy. There's a lot of gold already on this miniature, and I really don't need to just get his face too crammed together. You know, it's too much in too small of an area. So just doing a few touch-ups, and this stuff can be applied by brush too. It's just a lot easier to get an even coat when applied via airbrush, and for my purposes, a whole lot faster too. And that's going to pretty much do it for the red touch-ups. You know, there were just a couple of spots that needed some attention. So now I'm going to come through and start painting some other details. I needed another color. Just something else to help break the monotony of red and gold. So I just decided to go with black. I take the bolter and just paint that, as well as the skull at the back and his power pack. So just applying this black paint, and I did find while I was applying this that it was kind of drying with a little bit of a cracking effect. I've done models that had kind of a cracked paint look before, but it was always using some kind of crackle medium. You know, I'd paint something down, put this crackle medium down, and then the paint would kind of pull apart as it dried. So that's probably what was happening with the gold earlier, is that I wasn't painting anything in large enough sections to be able to really see the cracks. And if you look closely on the bolter, you can see right at the flat panel on the top there, just where the brush is touching, that a little bit of that candy or bright red is poking through. I decided I'd leave that, because I thought it added kind of a cool look to the model when you got close. It can look like the model just wasn't painted well, but I don't know. I thought it almost looked like a personalized weapon trim, if that makes sense. Like this guy just had a little bit of flavor added or something for his own personalized bolter. And there I'm just painting that skull in the middle of his power pack. I'm coming through and doing kind of another coat of black. It was at this point that I noticed that it was cracking like that, and so I put another coat on just to make it a little more subtle, something that you'd only notice if really close. Now I'm coming through with my usual black highlighting technique, just making it kind of a glossy black, so it's not super contrasted compared to everything else. So just going to do a couple of layers of growing grays, kind of growing in brightness, just kind of hitting everything. And I do know that for real 40k models, you're supposed to drill out the bolter. I get that. But for my purposes, I wasn't focusing on bolters or full models. I was just wanting to see this color. And honestly, on this particular model, the emphasis shouldn't be on his weapon. It'll be on his armor plates. So I'm just slowly cutting in more and more gray as I do these increasing layers. And it's progressively getting brighter as more and more layers dry. And just working my way up the gradient. I think it'd be kind of fun to have a full unit of these guys. Maybe Assault Marines, since they have the chain swords and stuff. Real bright, flashy, right in people's faces. But now you can start to see some of that gray really play. I got a little bit on the armor plate there, so just fixing that. Just trying to pull some of that gray I got on there off, because I really don't want to go back through and redo one armor plate because I had one, we'll say, less precise brush stroke. So getting close to being done with the grays now. As you can see on the tip of the bolter there, it's really getting bright. Now just picking a few extreme edges like the skull and a few small lines, and these are the end highlight, kind of as bright as it's going to get. I realized that I should probably have a reflection off the front line there, so I just went and added that in real quick. Real easy fix. And now we're going to be walking through the exact same process with the skull on his back. I'm kind of going to do almost like a slight wet blending here. I guess by that I mean I'm not letting the paint fully dry. Since it's such a small piece and it goes so quickly, I just kind of did my layer step-ups as it was slightly wet still, and just kind of did progressively getting brighter and to the more extreme highlights and touching less and less of the model. Kind of my usual style, just faster. Something small like this, you don't really notice. Most of it ends up being the bright color anyway, just due to the nature of how it's shaped and stuff. Now I'm just giving him some eyes. I figure black eyes, I don't need to make something glow because this model's bright enough. So I'm just doing some black lenses, and I'll be following it up with some gray in the bottom halves for a light sheen. Not adding a whole lot, like it's just almost the bottom half of like the first 2/3 of the lens. Not going all the way back, and it's not super bright. It's just kind of a real medium gray, just enough so that if you look close you notice, hey look, he does have kind of a little bit of a reflection on the lens there. Now I did go through with some white, and I tried to do kind of an intermediate flash, and after I did it, I didn't like how it looked. I mean, looking at it from the front, they're a little off kilter, but coming at it from the side on the eye I liked. After I finished it, it just didn't look good. It drew too much emphasis to his eyes, and once again, just like the bolter, his eyes are not the primary focus of this model. So I want them to be done, but I don't want them to just leap out. So now the model's just about done, but I wanted to give him a little bit of something fun, so I just decided I'd give him like a little private's insignia on his shoulder pad there. Most of these in-game have got all sorts of, unit markings and kind of emblems of their army and stuff. I don't really have any of that, so I just decided on something real small. So I just started by painting a small black line and then widening it to where I liked it. Then I came back through with a medium gray and kind of did 2/3, and now I'm doing the last third with a light gray to kind of give it a layered look so it looks like it might stand out a little bit, as opposed to just being painted on. So now I'm just coming through and I'm putting a slight wash on the gold pieces. I've just got my Seraphim Sepia, and I really love that ink, that ink wash from the Citadel range. It just looks so nice. So I'm just going through and hitting all the gold pieces. I guess it's not really like a true wash because I'm not doing like a full dip or anything. It's more of just like a colored depth. I don't know, I'm just adding it in to give the color a little more depth to it, round it out a little bit. Leaving it a little thicker on some of those rounded places like the kneecaps so that it can kind of help lend to the shadowing. The metallic paint does a pretty good job usually alone, indicating where light's really hitting, just because it's metallic paint. But when you follow it up with that shadow on the darker sides and make it deeper, it's almost like an optical illusion on the eyes, because it tricks them into making it look even darker than it is. So just doing that on the bottom sides of stuff and just making it look good. And now that the model's done, we need the model to sit on something. So I've just taken a piece of cork and glued it on a base and primed it black. And now I'm coming through with a dry brush of a dark gray to just give it a little bit of texture. And in fact, I make this base in another tutorial that you can see it done kind of better and more in depth. So now I'm just tracing out some lines on it, just making it look like it has some character. Once again, doing the same thing of painting it thinner first and then widening it up. Decided to go with a pair of yellow lines here. Now I'm not using the real technique of painting yellow. I'm kind of using the cheap technique. I've put the white down first, and I'm just going to use that to make the yellow look brighter. So it's almost like priming, if that makes sense. So now I'm coming through, and this is just a little bit of that sun yellow, and I'm just hitting each of these lines, and it's going to take a lot of coats. It's just, that's the nature of yellow. And especially, well, yellow going on white is easier than yellow going on black, but not as easy as yellow coming up from brown. So if I wanted to make this really easy, I would have done the white and then put a brown on top, and then stepped up to the yellow from there. And it would probably take fewer coats, even though I'm using 3 different paints, than it does to get this yellow down, going with just yellow on white. So learn from my mistakes, kids. Don't try and paint yellow straight up. It's a bad day. You won't have fun. And you'll end up getting a little sloppy and kind of ruining some of your details. Like my lines have gotten a little wider than I initially intended because of multiple coats of yellow and trying to put the coats down quickly. So heed my warning, ye who would paint yellow. Do it on brown. Step it up from brown. They share a lot of similar colors. It'll be easier. So now I'm just giving it all a light Nuln oil wash. Not going super heavy, but just enough for the road to kind of look dirty. You know, I don't want to just drown the road, but I definitely want those yellow stripes to not be bright in your face yellow. I want them to be a little bit of a mess. So now I'm just going to do a test fit for pinning. And yep, that's a good spot. It's not, you know, right in the middle of the lines, it's a little further out, but it works. So now I just need to put 2 and 2 together. So pinned it in place and apply some glue after I bash my camera. So this is just the old Loctite gel control, just getting on both the feet and slipping it in. The cork is really easy to get pin stuff to stick because cork just likes to hold pins. I didn't quite get it down where I wanted. I missed the lines where I wanted to have it sit. So I had to peel it up and it kind of pulled a little bit of the color with it. So I just took my brush, and it's just kind of a mashed dark gray black anyway. So I just hit it with a little bit of black and then mashed some dark gray on top, and you know, once it dries, you'll never know the difference. Easy. Cakewalk. I did finish both the base and the model before pinning them together, since I put a gloss varnish on the model and a matte finish on the base. Now we're playing with some weathering pigments. So this is both adding a shadow on the metallic surface, like it's reflecting the road, and also incorporating just road grime. Everything I've seen from Warhammer 40k indicates that it's not a very clean place. I think supposedly in the grand lore, it's like a world that's been consumed by war for like a universe, or galaxy. Galaxy? I think a galaxy consumed by war for like 10,000 years or so, and this is just the future of war. So yeah, it's not a happy place. So now that the pigment's applied, which is literally just ground up stuff, this is the stuff that goes in your paint. I'm taking some isopropyl alcohol and just brushing it on the legs of the miniature. Now what this does is it basically mixes the pigment into something that will bond, and then the alcohol dries up really easily, so it effectively paints the pigment into place. So now it's just cleaning up the edges, and now since I did spray with a gloss varnish, I don't want all of it to be glossy. You know, I just applied dirt and grime to his legs, and I don't need that to be bright and shiny. So I'm hitting his gun too, his weapon, his rifle, his bolter, all of the above, with some matte varnish to help bring it down so it's not quite as eye-grabbing as his armor is. Because, once again, we want the eye to jump first to his armor. That's where we want your primary focus to be with the model. And consider things like that when you're painting it. You know, where do you want people to look first? I usually want them to look at 1 or 2 things, so I'll make those things more prominent. and in this case, the bolter is really not one of them. So just applying that matte varnish to the legs and the feet, since I kind of dirtied them up, don't want them to shine anymore. And once it dries, it should have a little bit of a matte finish, you know, it shouldn't be as bright. And that's going to pretty much do it for this model. He's looking good, nice and weathered, on a base, bright, shiny, beautiful armor, and really grabs your eyes. Look really fly in a full unit on the table. And that's going to pretty much do it for today. If you liked what you've seen, please subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below and I'll get to them as soon as I see them. Until next time, happy painting.